Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 369 for the 2nd of Kislev in a leap year. Today's episode has been generously sponsored by my good friend and learning partner in Florida, Dorothy. We really need to get back to our learning one of these days, if you're listening to this. And so Dorothy generously sponsored this episode in honor of the Refuah Shlema of Shmuel Heschel ben Chana Dvorah, so he should have a speedy Refuah Shlema right away. So today we are going to be tackling a huge question. What does God want? If you've been following along the podcast for a little while, then you probably know the answer to this question, actually. It's not that complicated. On a simple level, what God wants is our mitzvos. God desires that we fulfill his commandments. But why is this? What's this all about? So in today's episode, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of this just a little bit, like the inner workings behind this desire, behind this flow that happens, the pathway between God's wish and our actual fulfillment of the commandments and how they connect in that way. So it's sort of like a way to think about it is like if you like think about like a business, and you think about like, let's take big in the news these days is Elon Musk and Twitter. So Elon Musk recently bought Twitter, and he obviously has like a vision for Twitter. He loves Twitter so much. And his ultimate goal with Twitter, I don't know what it is, but he has certain visions that he has in mind with Twitter. And his goal could be multifaceted. Like maybe one aspect of his goal is that he wants user engagement to be really, really high. Maybe he wants to generate maximum stock value. How is all this going to happen? So how does all this happen? How does the fulfillment come about? The wish fulfillment come about? This is going to be the subject of today's episode. And for context, we're still in the middle of Kuntres Acharon, the fourth essay of Kuntres Acharon. And as I've already mentioned several times, this is really the most complex Kabbalistic portion of the Tanya, where it really gets extremely technical. So I try as best as possible to bring these ideas down. And I really also hope that you guys don't get too caught in the weeds with it. So I try to, even though I don't want to shy away from the text and I want to get into the actual, text of the Alter Rebbe, at the same time, I think it's useful to kind of keep the main point in mind, or the main points in mind of what we're learning. And so to give this a little bit of context, yesterday we started this essay, and in beginning this essay, the discussion kind of led into like the conclusion from it all, and we're going to be continuing with this in this essay. There's a few days left of this essay, actually, it's quite long, is just about the incredible power of prayer and why prayer is the main thing of our generation, why prayer is the main thing we should be focusing on, where we should really, that which we should be focusing on the most in our day and age. And this is, not to detract from Torah and Mitzvos, because Torah and Mitzvos are also very important. And that's kind of like a three-pronged approach to Judaism. You can think of like learning Torah, doing Mitzvahs, and praying. But yet we learned from those three things, there's something unique about prayer, because of those three things, prayer is the only one that has the power to change reality, so to speak. So whereas when it comes to Torah and when it comes to mitzvahs, there's certain energy flow that we're instigating, that we're activating when we involve ourselves in Torah and doing mitzvahs. However, only with prayer can we actually change the process of what's going on. So with that being said, I'm actually going to start off at the end of today's portion to give this fuller context, because I think that actually can help keep us clear-headed about what we're going to learn today. And so in learning today's and preparing for today's episode, I actually was kind of feeling a little bit confused, aside from the technical nature of the episode and just it being very heavy Kabbalistically and all that. But in terms of subject matter, the vast majority of today's episode focuses on the power of mitzvahs and what mitzvahs are all about and what they accomplish and how mitzvahs specifically are God's will. And then at the very, very end, there's this couple of lines that talk about Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe Rabbeinu praying to enter into the land of Israel. And the broader theme of this whole essay, from my understanding, is about the power of prayer. So I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, if the whole point is all about prayer and telling us why prayer is so important, why is it that so much of today's episode actually is focusing on the mitzvahs and making it sound as if the mitzvahs are the primary focus? And then only at the end, kind of throwing it in there, this idea of Moshe praying to be in the land of Israel. So what's this all about? So here's my understanding of it, and here's my breakdown of the situation of what's happening, is that yes, mitzvahs are the whole point, as we'll see. The whole way, the point of the mitzvahs, and why are mitzvahs so essential? Because as we've learned, there was this whole process of what's known as shviras hakelim, the shattering of the vessels. So God had this initial, in manifesting himself, his whole point in creating the world was to manifest himself to other, is a way to kind of think about it, which is kind of a paradox because there is really ultimately nothing but God. But yet God's ultimate vision was to reveal himself, not to just be introverted in his own, space, so to speak, but for there to be some kind of relationship to something other than him, which is a very tricky thing to do if you're the only thing that exists, right? So there's lots of Chassidus that talks about this and getting into this whole idea. There's the Tzimtzum and all of that stuff. But on a basic level, the first level of revelation happens in the world of Tohu, which the world of Tohu is the world of chaos, where all of God's attributes, every single one of them, manifested him, but in a complete and pure way. And thus they could not coexist because each part of God, God has, as simple as God is one and unified. God is also very complex. God is multifaceted. There's the aspect of God that is giving. There's the aspect of God that's restraining and stuff like that. And each one of those manifests God in a total and pure way because everything about God is perfect and whole. But so when you had all of these attributes together manifesting God in a perfected way, they couldn't coexist because they are by nature contradictory. So there was an explosion that happened. That was what led to the shattering of the vessels, the shviras hakelim, because the light could not be contained within the vessels. It was too much for the vessels to handle because, like I said, vessels are all about containment, and these lights just could not be contained. They were too all over the place, too perfect, too great. Just like I always give the analogy, if you have too many CEOs running a company, you have no company, right? So in this case, their egos got shattered. These CEOs' egos got shattered, meaning there was the shviras hakelim, and all of the vessels shattered around. And so, okay, that's one step. And now what our purposes in this world is to rectify these vessels, because ultimately God he doesn't want a world of shattered vessels. He doesn't want a world of shattered CEOs, that also is not good for a company. But yet there has to be a way for everybody to come together, for all of it to be rectified. And that's our purpose here in the world. And the way that we do this is through the performance of the mitzvahs, as we'll see in more detail today. So then this brings us to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why was it that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed so fervently to get into the land of Israel? It wasn't just because, he wanted to see the sights and the climate was really good and all of that, but it was because he realized that there were certain mitzvahs that you can only do in the land of Israel. And so in the scope of the 613 mitzvahs, a lot of the mitzvahs are relevant for outside the land of Israel, but there's a good portion of them that are only relevant and can only be done within the land of Israel. So because Moshe Rabbeinu was on such a level that he really was able to acknowledge this higher purpose of reality, that the whole purpose of reality was this rectification of the vessel, he was extremely devastated when his punishment came to him and it was decreed that he should not enter into the land of Israel. So this is where prayer comes in, because prayer, which is that unique thing that is unlike Torah and mitzvahs that can't change reality, prayer actually could change reality. And Moshe knew this. And so this is why when he prayed to God, it wasn't selfish, so to speak. It wasn't just for a selfish prayer, it was because he wanted to fulfill all the mitzvahs. He wanted to fulfill all the mitzvahs, even those within the land of Israel. And even though there was this decree upon him that said, no, you cannot enter into the land of Israel, he knew that the power of prayer could change that. And in fact, it could have changed it. And in fact, he prayed so fervently that he prayed 515 times. Like he was so persistent in his prayer that God actually had to command him to stop praying, because God knew that if he continued to pray in this way, then God would have to listen to him, and reality would change and would be shifted. So it was, that's how powerful prayer is, that God literally had to put like a stopper on Moshe because his prayer was so powerful that it could have changed a reality that for whatever reason God didn't want. God wanted there to be this block, this exile, and for Moshe not to enter into the land of Israel. Why that is a discussion for another time, but that's basically what happened. So that's why, that's how we can understand all of this, is that on the one hand, and the context of what we're going to be learning about today, we're going to be learning about the incredible value of mitzvahs on the one hand, and then we're going to end and conclude with Moshe Rabbeinu praying, because they're really super connected. Because yes, prayer is so powerful because it's all about changing reality, and it's the only thing that can change reality. But what reality do you want to change? What's the point of reality? What is our purpose with reality? The ultimate purpose of everything is the mitzvahs. So that is how our prayers should be directed towards. And as we'll see today, that's why it's so crucial that in this flow of mitzvah fulfillments, there's actually a step in there that involves our intention. That's where the intention comes in. Our love and fear of God gets manifest, and we should try to manifest that as much as possible in order to bring down the ultimate flow of energy from above. So with that being said, let's see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. And once again, this section, like many other sections in the Kuntres Acharon, involves the kind of structure for it is the Alter Rebbe comparing two different places in Kabbalah that seem to contradict one another, and then he brings a resolution for them. So in this case, what are the two sections that seem to contradict each other? Is we have on the one hand the Eitz Chaim, which was written by the Arizal, and then on the other hand we have the Zohar, and which was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and we see that each one of them talks about the source of the mitzvahs, where the mitzvahs come from, where they originate, and they both have different answers, and these answers seem to contradict one another, and the Alter Rebbe is going to resolve them. So what's the difference? So in the Eitz Chaim, then it's written where are the mitzvahs from. So we know that the mitzvahs have two main categories, right? There's the positive commandments, and then there's the transgressions, the 248 positive commandments, the 365 negative commandments or prohibitions. And the Eitz Chaim says that the positive commandments, they come from a place which is known as the Hei Chasadim, the 5 attributes of kindness, the 5 kindnesses, and the 365 negative commandments, the prohibitions, come from the 5 gvuros, the Hei gvuros, the 5 attributes of severity. Okay, so what this means exactly is a whole topic into itself, but suffice it to say what this means basically is, if you've been, following along, hopefully you have a little bit of a sense of like what each of the attributes mean, really. And so within the world of Atzilus, which is the origin of all the worlds, then we have all of the attributes, right? And so within the world of Atzilus, we have the Za of Atzilus, the Zer Anpin of Atzilus. That's the 6 attributes. And the 6 attributes are kind of like, that's like the functional aspect of Atzilus. That's like just like a person's emotive attributes, or that's their like functions. That's like how they operate in the world. It's what makes a person is their attributes. What's your personality type? What's your emotions? That kind of thing. The mind is something else. The mind is sort of like maybe the inner motivations and stuff like that. But the cognitive functions, but the emotional functions is really what makes a person. So too for God, his Zer Anpin of Atzilus, that's sort of like his functions. That's sort of like the way that we relate to him. And within those, the Zer Anpin, so we know that what are the first 2 of the emotional attributes? We have chesed and we have gvura. We have a kindness and severity, or restraint, or giving and restraint. And each one of those is further subdivided into 5. So I know it gets very, very technical here, but suffice it to say, there are levels within each one of the attributes. So there are 5 attributes of chesed and 5 attributes of gvura. They actually are paralleled in the human by the 5 fingers on the right hand and the 5 fingers on the left hand. So it's like when you give with your right hand, you're giving with all 5 fingers. And when you take with your left hand or hold back with your left hand, you're holding back with all 5 fingers of the left hand. And so, okay, so getting back into our text, getting away from that tangent there. So basically, according to the Eitz Chaim, the source of the mitzvahs comes from the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras, the 5 Chasadim and the 5 Gvuras within the world of Atzilus, okay? All right, but now we see that in the Zohar, it says something very different. It says that where do the 613 mitzvahs come from? They all come from one path, from one place. What is this one place that they come from? They come from what's known as the lavnunit. The lavnunit means like whiteness, which is a reference to keter. Why is it a reference to keter? Because it's a reference to the white on top of the head. So it's like, if you think about your skull, your head, the crown of your head, you have your hair, and in between your hair, in between the roots of the hair, there's white on the hair, because the white is considered the hair is considered Kabbalistically to be like a flow of energy. So it's a certain type of contraction that's necessary in order for this flow to happen. And so that which does not flow, which is kind of like beyond flow, so that it did not get contracted yet, is manifest in the whiteness of the skull, which is the keter, which is the will. So it's above intellect, it's will. So again, now to just reiterate the question here, the seeming contradiction. The Eitz Chaim says that the mitzvahs come from these 2 sources within Atzilus, the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras. But according to the Zohar, the mitzvahs actually come from one place. They all come from one place, and that's the lavnunit. So what's the deal? Do they come from the lavnunit, or do they come from the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras? It seems to contradict each other. So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain all of this. So he says the way to understand this seeming contradiction and to resolve the seeming contradiction is to first of all understand the purpose of the mitzvahs. Why do we keep mitzvahs? What's the point of them all? The reason why we keep mitzvahs is in order to rectify the 248 organs of the Zer Anpin by drawing the light of the Ein Sof into the mochin, which are made up of the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras. Okay, so that's a lot. So let's just try to break that down a little bit. So the purpose of the mitzvahs, why do we do the mitzvahs, is in order to rectify the 248 organs of God, right? Because we have 248 positive commandments and they parallel the 248 organs. And those 248 organs are manifest within the Zer Anpin within Atzilus, because then again that's where like everything that we relate to God, that's where it's kind of found. That's like what we can think of as like the functions of God is within the Zer Anpin, the functional aspects of God. Okay, so how do these 248 organs of God get rectified? This happens by way of the influence, the flow of the infinite light of the Ein Sof in the mochin. What is the mochin? The mochin means intellect, and the intellect is made up of Hey Chasadim and Hey Gvuras. So this might get a little confusing, but I'll try to explain this. So the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras, they seem not to be intellectual. They seem to be emotive, right? But for the sake of our discussion, and this is where we really see again how relative so many terms are in Kabbalah and Chassidus, because it depends how you're looking at it. In a certain sense, we could understand these Hey Chasadim and Hey Gvuras as being mochin, as being the intellect. And what is the source of the mochin? The source of the mochin is the lavnunit, is the keter. So basically, that's in simple terms, what the Alter Rebbe is describing basically is that when we say on the one hand that according to the Eitz Chaim, the mitzvahs come from the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras, but according to the Zohar, they come from the lavnunit. The Alter Rebbe is saying it's not a contradiction, because what are the Hey Chasadim and the Hey Gvuras? These are the mochin. This is the mind of God, and the source of this mind is in the lavnunit. So the lavnunit, the keter, is just like, the Zohar is basically just like tapping into one step above that. And what is this levnunit and how is it connected to the mitzvahs is because the levnunit is the keter. The keter, again, if you've been following in the podcast, keter is oneg and chafetz. Oneg is pleasure and desire. So this is the supernal pleasure and desire that God has to draw down his light down here into the 248 organs of the Zeir Anpin down here below. So meaning to say that the origin of God's will for this rectification to happen of the 248 organs that it comes about through the mitzvahs, the origin of that is in the levnunit, in the keter. And this hamshacha, this drawing down, like this flow of energy that comes from the levnunit into the mochin as manifest through the Hei Chasadim and Hei Gvura, gets subdivided into the 613 specific flows, very individual flows, each one according to the particular mitzvah that it is. So for example, so there are 600 flows, just like in the Zohar, it said that the source of all the 613 mitzvahs comes from this levnunit. So it does. They all come from the levnunit. So it goes from the levnunit into the mochin, and then from the mochin down below. And the mochin is divided into the Hei Chasadim and the Hei Gvuras. And we see this, that there are different kinds of mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs are more chesed oriented, like let's say being kind to people, giving tzedakah, all that stuff. That is all from the side of chesed. So that's from the side of the Hei Chasadim. Versus on the side of Gvura, there are certain mitzvahs that involve Gvura. There are certain mitzvahs that involve rachamim. There's all kinds of different mitzvahs that we have, and each one is subdivided into those ways. So we see that, yes, it's coming from the levnunit, but then the way that it flows downward is through these different pathways, which could be kind of like collectively referred to as the Hei Chasadim and the Hei Gvuras. And another way to understand this and to think about this is that the actual fulfillment of the mitzvahs, like when we actually do the mitzvahs, then what we're doing is we're drawing down the divine light into the external vessels of whatever attribute the mitzvah has to do with. So for example, if we do a kindness to somebody, then we're drawing down light into the external vessel of the chesed of Zeir Anpin. Okay, or if we're doing some kind of mitzvah that has to do with Gvura, then we're drawing down light into the external vessel of Gvura, etc. But the way that this light gets drawn down, the way that the light, how does it become drawn down into these external vessels? It has to go through the internal vessels first. What are the internal vessels? The internal vessels are these intellects, the mochin. And what does this mean? The mochin, the more internal aspects of these things, this has to do with the love and fear of God. So, and as we've learned before, there's intellectually generated love and fear of God, which is considered to be on a higher level. And then there's the more innate love and fear of God. And the way that these are referred to in Kabbalah is mochin de katnus and mochin de gadlus. So mochin de katnus is like small intellect, and that's the innate love of God. And the mochin de gadlus, the higher type of mochin, is a more superior, is the intellectually generated love and fear of God. So basically, so I know it's a lot, but basically the main idea is that the way that what the ultimate purpose that God wants is for his 248 organs to be rectified. How does this happen? Through our performance of the mitzvahs. But when we perform these mitzvahs, then the motivation for performing the mitzvahs is coming from our love and fear of God. So this love and fear of God could be either intellectually based or it could be innate. But whatever it is, that's what's motivating us to perform these mitzvahs down here. And why is it that the love and fear of God is what motivates us? Because we ultimately recognize, either intellectually so or innately so, that this is God's ultimate will, God's ultimate desire. This is his keter, this is his desire, this is his will. His innermost will is for us to do these mitzvahs, which will rectify his organs. You know, it's like lahavdil. Let's say if you have someone you love who's in pain, you want to take away that pain. And anytime God, so to speak, his organs are not rectified, there's a certain type of pain. That's what exile is. And so us doing these mitzvahs is a way to alleviate God's pain, to relieve him from the pain. And we do this through all the different mitzvahs that we do. And this is why there are so many different categories of mitzvahs, some that involve more giving, some that involve more restraints, like tznius might be something like that, you know? And so this is how we can resolve this seeming contradiction between the Eitz Chaim and the Zohar, because where the Eitz Chaim says that the mitzvahs come from the Hei Chasadim and the Hei Gvuras, they do, because that's how they flow downwards. That's the flow from them. But they do ultimately, like the Zohar said, come from the love nunit, because that is the origin of all of it, is from God's will. So finally here, now we've reached the conclusion of this section where the Alter Rebbe brings in Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says, from all of this, now that we understand the deep meaning behind the mitzvahs and why the mitzvahs, why it is that God really wants us to do these mitzvahs, now we can really understand why it was that Moshe Rabbeinu pleaded so fervently in order to enter into the land of Israel, because he realized that these mitzvahs that all of the mitzvahs, including those performed in the land of Israel, this is the ultimate purpose of all of everything, of the entire hishtalshelus, it's known as in Hebrew. The entire downflowing of everything is all for us to do these mitzvahs in order to draw down divine light and to rectify the kelim of Zer Anpin, specifically in the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which is lower than Atzilus, within which are found the 288 fallen sparks, right? So because the sparks fell into the lower realms outside of Atzilus into the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. So that's where the sparks are, and that's where the rectification has to happen through our practical performance of the mitzvahs. And specifically keeping Torah and mitzvahs, practical mitzvahs, in the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, specifically in the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, specifically, which is why Moshe prayed so fervently for God to let him into the land of Israel, because he realized the value of the mitzvahs so much, and because he understood the power of prayer. So that's it for today. I hope that was somewhat comprehensible to you guys. I know this stuff is really, really deep. This section of Tanya, again, is just very complex. This whole part that we're going to be learning is, I think it's considered to be the hardest part of Tanya. So if you're staying with me, then good for you. And I'm learning this together with you. As I've mentioned, a lot of these ideas, even though I've learned Tanya before, every year I learn the Tanya and review it and everything. It's every time I still need to really rock my brain to get this stuff even somewhat comprehensible on any level. So thank you for being with me on this journey, and we will continue with this tomorrow, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.